Hello and welcome to the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. My name is Rim. I'm an artist, a certified life coach and an NLP practitioner, and the creator of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative retreats. Passionate about celebrating joy and beauty in the everyday, especially when things are falling apart, I'm insatiably curious about human nature, and I look into the world with reverence, awe, and a sense of wonder. Tune in for stories exploring healing through creativity, art, embracing sensitivity, and navigating the subconscious mind. I'll talk about the struggles that highly sensitive and creative people face, and share my experiences, insights, and favorite tools along the way. I'm here to empower you to turn what we often deem to be a curse into your biggest gift. I believe that the more we create together, the more we heal the world. So, let's dive in! Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. I'm so happy and grateful for you tuning in. Today I'm joined by Bianca Giulione, the host and creator of Life Forces podcast, a podcast that discusses astrology, human design, transitions, balance, and so much more. Bianca is a cosmic clarity coach based in Greece, helping individuals and facilitating groups to find greater self-knowledge and feel emboldened to live their purpose through the everyday integration of spirituality. She takes a unique, holistic approach to personal growth and well-being, combining different modalities she has learned along her journey, such as tarot, astrology, human design, Ayurveda, breathwork, and Neuro Linguistic Programming, NLP. Bianca is currently the In-house Astrologer at Ora Collective and works with people online from all walks of life and parts of the world. This is a two-part interview series because our conversation flows so nicely that it ended up being also full of interesting stuff, and I didn't want you to miss out. In the first part of our interview, we talk about tuning into the rhythms of nature, taking the leap to working abroad, following your gut and taking risks, burnout and how to recover, and how is that linked to your human design blueprint. We also talk about red flags at work and the nervous system, taking risks and nurturing your life force when in a draining and frustrating situation. We also explore fear and how pushing through fear can teach us a lot in the process. So I'm particularly excited to share this episode today because this is the one that I had recorded end of June when I wanted to plan and be organized and all of that. And at the end I got sick right when I was editing it, and I lost it. Like, I lost all my work, all the editing file, right after having done the work for a full day. And it turns out that Bianca also had some life stuff coming up exactly at the same moment. So it's interesting, this synchronicity. But now I'm recovered. Luckily I found the file back, I found our recording, and I was able to edit it again. I'm mentioning this because there was a slightly technical gap, like a little gap between us. So sometimes it would take a little bit of time before she could hear me, and the same for me. So I try to make it as smooth as possible so that it's not too bothering to hear. But yeah, if you hear some discrepancies, please be forgiving. It's technical stuff. I've known Bianca for almost 2 years now, and we've had a lot of conversation about allowing ease into our working life, not pushing, and instead receiving, welcoming, nurturing our life force, and taking care of our gut, taking care of our health so that we can listen to our gut. And you will see it's really, she has a lot of interesting things to share, and I think you're going to enjoy our conversation. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Bianca.
Hello, Rim.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Excited to dig in.
So can you start by telling us where are you?
Yes, I am in Greece and I live on an island in Greece that I don't want to name, but it's a Greek island.
Lovely. And how is life there?
It's great. I feel very, very lucky and happy to be here after many years of living in cities, probably 11 years of my adult life living in cities. It's really nice to be somewhere that feels very aligned, whether it's the environment, the people, the fact that I can go to the beach basically every day if I want to. I really like it. It's a really good pace of life and balance for me.
Yes, I can imagine the difference, but that's such being able to go to the beach every day. What a dream.
Yeah, it really.
Do you find that you enjoy it as much as you thought you would? Like when I say enjoy, like do you actually take advantage of that as much as you thought you would before moving there?
I do actually. There are some days where it's like, maybe I shouldn't be at the beach for a few hours, but I just do it. You know what I mean? I kind of tend to prioritize that, to be honest. And I do feel like I get my fix enough. I don't really feel like, oh, I should have gone today. Like that doesn't happen so often. And I think also because of the weather here, like sometimes we have quite strong winds. So for example, it's a really windy day, or if it's a bit cloudy or something, okay, that's a day where I might focus more on work or something else. But if it's like beautiful sunny day, not a lot of wind, I'm going to do my best to prioritize, connecting with nature, going to the beach, being outside, whatever it is.
Yeah, lovely. So you're kind of in rhythm with nature. That's beautiful. So you mentioned the city before. Like, which city are you from, or which country? Where did you live before? Oops.
So I was born in Canada, just outside of Toronto. So I grew up in a suburb for most of my life. The suburb was still pretty big, like I think 500, 600,000 people probably when I was living there. But, suburb, it's not like downtown, culture, all that kind of stuff. But then after high school, I went to study in Montreal for university. And I lived there for 6 years total. So I stayed a couple years after I graduated. And then at a certain point, after living in Montreal, I wanted something different and I wanted to be somewhere kind of even bigger. Like that's what I was craving at the time. So I ended up moving to Berlin, and that's where I lived for 5 years before I came to Greece.
Wow, that's so exciting. So why did you choose Berlin?
I chose Berlin because at the time I was super into electronic music and I was DJing. And so when I was in Montreal, I was working this job that I really disliked. I was working for this jewelry company, helping with marketing or something. And I really hated it. So I started thinking bigger. And I was like, okay, is there anywhere I'd like to work? And maybe they're taking interns or offering something kind of entry level. And there was this online electronic music magazine that I loved. And I remembered I had met one of the editors in 2012. So at the time I was, thinking about this job, I think it was 2015. So anyway, a few years prior, I had met one of the editors and I saw that they did hire interns. So I sent him a message and he's like, you should totally apply, blah, blah, blah. So I got an interview with a few members from the team. We Skyped. Zoom was not a thing. And I got the position. I accepted. And not long after, I flew to Berlin. And my internship was only for a few months, but I decided to stay after. I had a little bit of back and forth, like going back to Canada for a bit, whatever. But I ended up staying in Berlin longer than I expected. I don't really know what I was expecting. I just knew I wanted to live somewhere else.
And how many years did you end up in Berlin?
5
5 years,
yeah.
Okay. Wow. And what made you move to Greece? Because that's such a radical change from electronic music in Berlin to a Greek island.
Yeah, this is very interesting. So already, in my last couple of years in Berlin, I knew I wanted something a bit different. At first, I thought maybe I would spend half the year in somewhere like Los Angeles because I love it there. I have friends there, warmer client, great, I don't know, so many nice things to do there. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do that. But I'm like, I don't know. I heard so many kind of discouraging stories about getting US visas. Although I think if I was there 50-50, I could have worked it out. Anyway, doesn't matter. So yeah, already, even before COVID stuff started, I was less and less interested in the electronic music scene and in particular going out because I was not drinking alcohol anymore. I wasn't doing drugs really. So I wasn't as drawn to that world as much. So it's kind of like the thing that first brought me there was not really part of my life as much anymore. So it felt a bit strange. So I was already kind of craving something different. And then in 2020, in the summer, when there were, some travel restrictions were lifted, I was invited to go to Greece by a friend that I met online. And she invited me to this particular island, not the one I live in now, another one. And I went with her and really loved it. And also I really loved who I was there. Like it was almost like I was a different person or a different side of me came out that hadn't really emerged in a long time. And I realized that I just had such an affinity towards, Greece and Greek people, also because my family is Italian. Like my father was born in southern Italy. My mom was born in Canada, but of southern Italian parents. So I've always felt an affinity between other people from Southern Europe. Like I just culturally feel like there's a lot of nice energy versus living in Northern Europe wasn't quite the same. And I realized like that was something I was really missing. So I was there for about 10 days. I did some other traveling in Italy. And I thought to myself, what would it be like if I stayed on this island for the winter? Like if I could find a house to rent and stayed there instead of, continuing my life in Berlin. And part of me thought I was completely insane and it seemed totally illogical, but I went for it. So that's what I did. I found a house to rent. I subletted my apartment in Berlin. At first I told the subletter, like 3 months, 6 months. And he's like, I'm only doing a year. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm subletting the apartment for the year then, and let's just see what happens. And yeah, I stayed. So I kind of accidentally moved to Greece. That's how it went down.
Wow. I have so many questions about that. But first, I want to ask you this little question I like to ask at the beginning. What is your your basic astro signs?
So I'm a Cancer sun, a Virgo moon, and an Aquarius rising. That's my big three.
Okay. The sign, like the energy related to that. Water for Cancer, Virgo.
Virgo is earth and Aquarius is air. Okay.
Quite balanced.
I have been told, I am an astrologer now, so I know, but when I was still learning, someone did tell me, oh, you have like a pretty balanced chart, because I also have a lot of fire in my chart too.
Ah, lovely balance. And what about your human design?
Yes. So my energy type is I'm a generator. And then my profile is 2-4.
So 2-4 is like the hermit. Is it the hermit and the opposite?
The hermit opportunist. Yeah.
The hermit opportunist.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And opportunist means that you like to be with people.
It's about getting a lot of opportunities from your network and from the people around you. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting dichotomy, right? Because there's, so much of me that wants to be alone all the time. But then there's this other part of me that needs to be out in the world, meet people, connect, all of that sort of thing.
Okay. Wow. That's so interesting with what you were saying about your life experience, living in an island and living in big cities partying, like doing DJing for big events surrounded by people. And I find this so interesting because just before we were chatting, before recording the podcast, and you told me that your Myers-Briggs was a mix, like you're not sure if you're INFP or ENFP, or it's like time between the two. So here again is the introvert extrovert.
Yes. Yes. Totally. I think the first time I did a Myers-Briggs test, like years and years ago, I got ENFP, but I think when I've done it more recently, it's been INFP. But as I was telling you before, it's like 51% introvert, 49% extrovert. So yeah, it's interesting. That's also reflected in my human design profile. Totally.
Yeah. Do you think that you were more ENFP at the time? You were more into DJing, maybe drinking, nightlife and all that. And now that you're living a more simple life or quieter life, you have turned into slightly more INFP. Do you think these are ties?
I think I'm sure there's somewhat of a correlation. I think also, I don't know, growing up, I always thought it was good to be extroverted. Do you know what I mean? And I think not that I denied my introvertedness, but I don't know, it just felt good and like the right thing to do to be more of an extrovert. And I think just as I've gotten to know myself better, and I don't know, like I went through a lot of different things in my 20s, like many people have, I realized that I did need a good deal of alone time. And for example, like in my later half of my 20s, I lived alone as much as I could, so I had that balance. So even if I was DJing and going to clubs and, working at an office and whatever, I usually lived alone. So I did have that balance in that way. But I think, yeah, it's something I've just gotten more comfortable with, knowing that I'm an introvert. And yeah.
So now that you're in an island, I guess you spend more time on your own. So how do you balance this need for withdrawing and going towards others?
Well, I think so. I moved to this specific island where I live now at the end of 2021. And to be honest, I basically had no friends on the island for about a year. And that was really hard. So I only really had like my partner in real life. And so, I mean, one thing is living abroad for a while now, I've always been pretty good at keeping in touch with my friends from Canada or other places. So like that's something that I try to integrate into my life. Like one of my friends from Montreal, we have like a standing weekly call on Mondays, and we're like pretty good at keeping up with that. So that's something that helps me stay connected to people. But luckily, since last fall, I've met more people here. So I do have a bit more of a community. And like I have a friend here that I for sure speak to basically every day, if not see almost every day. And also for me, as I've gotten older, I don't know, I used to think I needed so many friends and, need to know so many groups of people, but I'm not so attached to that anymore. I would just rather have quality relationships, people who I feel really understand me. I get what they're all about, rather than needing to be everyone's friend. So yeah, for me, it's more about quality. If I have like one or two good friends where I live, like I'm good, to be honest.
Yeah, that's more. I totally agree. That's more than enough. And I think we can focus more on the quality, on the depth of conversation than being like the social butterfly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's definitely, right. So like, the 4 in my profile in human design, that's a very social energy. Also, my Aquarius rising is a very social energy. So I think when I'm really craving stuff like that, I let myself go there. I let myself go out or whatever. And also, where I am, I don't live so far from like a major city. So if I really, really need that kind of energy, I can go get it. So I find my ways,
Yeah. A bit like what you said before, like you can go to the beach whenever you feel like it, and when the weather is more windy or the energy isn't there, then you focus on other things. So it's like it's like flowing with the rhythm of nature and also the rhythm of your body needs, your energy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're a generator, so which means for those who don't know, generator is the kind of life energy, right? Like when you, well, maybe you can explain a little bit more because you're a specialist.
Yeah. So, yeah, generator is just one of the 5 energy types in human design. And what makes us generators, I say us because Rim is also a generator,
Yes.
is that we have a defined sacral center. And the sacral center has a lot to do with workforce and life force energy. So we do have a great capacity to do things, but the important thing is that we are excited and lit up by what we are doing. So this is something like, even though I know human design, I teach human design, I give readings, still to this day, I have to check in with myself and be like, okay, does this actually light me up, or am I just doing this out of obligation, right? I mean, there's some things, there's some things we have to do, right? Like maybe brush our teeth and pay tax, kind of outside of that, whatever we have. But yeah, just, I have to remind myself as a generator, like outside of the obligations that I have, what are the things that I think I should do that really I don't necessarily need to, and what instead can I bring into my life that will actually be interesting and exciting to me, and then, generate more passion and interest and excitement for other people around me, not just myself.
Yeah, I find the sacral, it seems to be such a powerful force, and at the same time, it's so tricky. It's so tricky to listen to. I think probably we haven't learned that, of course. Most of us haven't learned that since we are children. And I feel like we learn to be so disconnected from our body that it gets really hard. And I feel like that also when we are, I have this feeling that when we have a lot of, like when we have like watery signs and this like influence of emotions, it's kind of paradoxical. We could think, oh well, if you feel your emotions a lot, then it means you're connected to your body. But at the same time, I think, at least my experience was, my emotions were so strong that it kind of disconnected me from my body, because it was so weird or so difficult, so heavy, that I didn't know how to handle it, and therefore I found like the best way to handle it was to numb or to disconnect or to to find peace or balance elsewhere, not within me, and therefore it was hard to connect to my body. How was your experience with that?
Yes, I really, really, really resonate with that. Yeah. I mean, I think I am a Cancer sun, but because my moon is in Virgo, that creates this really interesting thing within me where, especially when I was younger, I actually suppressed my emotions a lot of the time. And I did have a bit of perfectionism in me. So because of that, I didn't always fully express my emotions, but then they would kind of come out like a volcano every once in a while. And yeah, I think especially in my 20s, I was really disconnected with my body and I didn't really know how to form that connection again. It took me until in my later 20s to really figure it out and get there. And it's something I'm still working on, but yeah, it's just the most important thing. And I think we're not really taught the value of it, because a lot of times logic is really prioritized or seen as better as, listening to your body's wisdom and things like that. And I think also sometimes emotions are important, and it is important for us to really feel them and process them. But our feelings aren't always, the final answer for something, right? Because, for example, if we're really afraid of doing something and we let that be the reason we don't do the thing, it might be something that's really good for us. It's just outside of our comfort zone. But if we're paying too much attention to that fear and giving it all the power, then, that's a way where, clinging onto our emotions too much can maybe be a bit of a negative thing or kind of take us off course,
Yeah, totally. Actually, I think we are not, we are not, like the same way we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions. So for me, I have come to learn that emotions are like energy moving, and it doesn't mean like if I'm scared of something, it doesn't mean I'm a fearful person. Or if I'm angry at some point, it doesn't mean I am anger. I'm not anger. I'm just angry at the moment. Like I'm feeling this. I'm experiencing the feeling or the emotion of anger or the emotion of fear. It doesn't mean it's me. And feeling the fear is like normal. It's totally normal. But as you say, it would be a pity to make it mean something more than that. Well, it does mean something more, but
yes.
But it doesn't mean that it's a sign that you should not do the thing.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like making your emotions mean something about you, like who you are as a person fundamentally. You know what I mean? Like that is dangerous territory, I think.
But how, like, since we're talking about generator and the sacral energy and connecting to the body, sacral is in the belly. It's in the belly, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, I mean, if you relate it to kind of the traditional chakra system, you have the root chakra kind of at the base of your spine, and then your sacral is kind of like underneath your belly button. You know what I mean? It also can have to do with reproductive energy. Even in human design, the sacral has to do with reproductive energy. And in kind of more, let's say, traditional human design, like the original teachings of Ra Uru, who founded it, he had this thing of like, generators and manifesting generators are the ones that are meant to be parents because they have the energy and the capacity for it. Like, I don't fully buy that. I think anyone can be a parent, but there is something to be said of like having the sustainable energy to be able to take care of your children, in a way that you can do it, whereas some other energy types might need support, right? Might need more support.
Well, I have some. I think this is weird. Yeah, it makes sense in a way, but like my mom, she's a projector, and my sister is a projector and a Virgo, and they have children. And like actually, in my family, everyone is projector except me, and they all have such energy, much energy. They're always doing, and like my mom and my sister, they both have or had a career. Working a lot and children and taking care of the children and doing so many things, always busy, always doing. And like I felt like, especially my mom, she has such a life force energy and yet she's a projector and I'm a generator, and I feel like I get exhausted so much faster, and I don't have kids. So I'm like, really?
Yeah, I think it really, it depends so much on the person. And I mean, also, I don't want to categorize like projectors or reflectors or manifestors, the non-sacral people, as people that never have energy. It's just that technically, they don't have a defined sacral. But if they're in the presence of other sacral people, they will pick up on that energy and amplify it. So sometimes they can even seem like they have more energy than a manifesting generator or a generator. The thing they have to be careful, though, is to, not burn out, like to make sure that they get enough rest and maybe a little bit of alone time so that they can discharge other people's energy from them. But not to say that they can't do a lot of things, or work or raise children normally, let's say.
Yeah, no, of course. That would be silly because... That's too categoric, I think. But it's interesting because I'm the one who did so many burnout in my family, and they didn't. They have anxiety, they deal with stress, they have their things, but they didn't do a burnout, or they didn't do any burnout, or many burnouts, and I did so many. Well, it could be that I was further from my truth than they were. Maybe I was not in my self-theme, I don't know. could be, or maybe like I think about the case, like my mom's case, maybe she repressed it for so long. Because she's also an HSP, she was also a highly sensitive person, and she's the middle child like me, so she always had the role of the one who has to handle other people's feelings, like in these codependent families, when there is one who is supposed to make the effort and be responsible for others' well-beings and emotions and so on. And then she kind of passed it on to me. So maybe that's also why I was having more burnouts and saying yes to situations, like not listening to my sacral, by the way, and saying yes to things that are not right. Maybe that could be also...
Yeah, that was me for the longest time. That was me up until like a couple of years ago. Really, yeah, because that can be a thing with generators. It's like, we think it's not a big deal to say yes to something, even if it's like a little thing, even if it's like, oh, going for coffee with someone for like an hour and you don't really want to go, but you're like, yeah, I'll go, whatever. I haven't seen this person in a while. But it can really just throw you off or like really throw off your day. So I try to be, when I remember, try to be really like, okay, do I want to do this? Yes or no? It's okay if it's a no. I have to be honest with myself, because it's not going to be a good situation for anyone involved, really, more than just me.
Yeah, so then you end up depleted and you get resentment and frustration.
Yeah.
I want to talk more about this because I know you had a big burnout that changed a lot of things for you. Can you talk more about that episode?
Yeah, I can talk more about that for sure. So when I was living in Berlin, I had a job in music journalism for another magazine, not the initial one that I got the internship at. And at first it was cool, like I had a decent salary, I could meet all my needs. It was all good. Then after a while, probably like my second year in, like towards the end of my second year, probably, I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I don't know what's happening, but I can't do this. Like, it felt so difficult to go into work, even though the work wasn't like that challenging and it was fine. And, in a lot of ways, it was a cool job. I got to interview musicians. I got to go to festivals and things like this. And I remember, right around the time where I was like, I really can't do this anymore, we went to 2 festivals, 2 weekends in a row. And I was probably interviewing a few people at each festival. Like it was really a lot of work. And I could see that I couldn't bring myself to prepare as much for things as I normally did. And, we had this little like backstage area, like in this dusty area at the back of one of the stages. And it was terrible. And I just remember like, I didn't want to speak to anyone in between my work. I didn't really care so much about like seeing the artists at the festival or whatever. I just didn't want to do anything. I like sat on the ground and read like Marianne Williamson's A Return to Love. I was just like, I can't do this. So I remember bringing it up to my boss, who was a friend, and they were very cool about it. And then I spoke to someone who was a bit above my boss at work to just be like, okay, could we do something like I work 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week for the same money? That would kind of be like a raise to me. And he's like, I'll let you know if that's possible and get back to you. And then like a week later, I was like, I can't wait for him to whatever he's going to say. I don't care, because I just don't want to be here anymore. So I decided to quit. I kept working there for a few months after, just because that's the way things went. But yeah, it was a really good decision that I made for myself. Not to say that like right after I quit was like the easiest, most amazing time of my life or anything, but I really needed to get out of that situation. There was nothing like inherently wrong about the job, like nothing people haven't experienced at like, a fairly big company, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I was sleeping enough, but I had no energy for anything. Like, it was really crazy.
So big fatigue, no life force energy anymore. And what else? Like, how did you, what were your emotions back then? How did you feel?
Yeah, I just felt really over everything, especially having to do with that job. And I just realized that it really wasn't aligned for me anymore in terms of values and in terms of using my talents. Like sometimes it was just so frustrating. I remember one time, and this was even like well before I knew I wanted to quit, I brought up an idea for a video series. And at first, you know, everyone was like, I don't think it's going to work. It's not good, whatever. And then not long after, they started using the idea and it became a pretty big thing. And someone else at the company took credit for it, you know? And I'm just like, I'm done. You know, like at that point I was already really annoyed. So there's just those frustrations that build up. You know, I think I felt a lot of frustration, which now I know is the not self of being a generator. So being in that state, basically 5 days a week, 8-9 hours a day, you know, that was not doing good things for me. And yeah, it was difficult for me to find my joy, especially at the workplace. I kind of only found it outside, you know, when I was doing certain things, when I was hanging out with certain people. But yeah, frustration was one of the main things I felt, I'd say.
So like you felt frustration, gradually it became more worse and worse until you just felt in your body, like that's it, I don't have the energy for it anymore. Yeah. So you just knew basically when you felt it in your body, it was like as if you cannot, like as if it's a car and there's no gas anymore. It cannot just keep driving.
Yeah. And I think I remember imagining what it would be like if I stayed. And I think that was a lot that was going through my mind. I was just like, okay, it's maybe a more stressful time because we're doing these festivals on top of our normal stuff. Like, but what would happen if I stayed into the fall? And I was just like, I don't see how I would like this again. I don't see how this could work for me again. And also at the time, I was getting really into Ayurveda and, you know, learning all about balance, learning all about balancing the different energies that we have within us. And I could just see that I wasn't in a very balanced place. And I was also getting into more esoteric things like tarot. And, you know, I tried to incorporate those things as much as I could into my job. Like I wrote articles about like rappers' natal charts, but there's only so much of that I could do. You know, I couldn't like totally have that role at the company. So yeah, at a certain point, it was just like I could feel the absolute hell no in my body, which is very important as a generator. And I went with it.
Did you also feel like it wasn't really you, or like you had to wear a mask or to pretend to be someone you're not, or you're not anymore? Maybe you were a little bit of it at some point and then you were not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure by the end of it, because also like, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, or maybe you were never that person, but somehow you thought you had to be.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both, because to be honest, I originally took the job mostly because I needed something to be able to stay in Germany. And yeah, in retrospect, there were a lot of red flags from the beginning that I kind of ignored just because I needed something. And to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of where I was in terms of experience and everything else, like it was probably one of the best roles and companies I could have, you know, been at the time. But there were red flags from the beginning that if I were in a similar situation now, I just wouldn't have taken the job in the first place. I would have figured something else out. So that was it. So yeah, I think there was a bit of contorting myself to be a certain type of person. But then, especially by the end, I felt that it really wasn't aligned for me anymore.
Yeah, I've experienced this so many times, ignoring the red flags, like thinking, oh, well, maybe it doesn't mean that it's just a little detail.
Yeah.
But it's not actually little details. well, you know, one detail plus one detail plus one detail plus one detail, it makes up the whole. So it doesn't mean that it means everything, but it does mean. Yeah. It's so interesting how we tend to dismiss it or dismiss them. But one other thing you said, like now you wouldn't do the same, but like I think often we ignore red flags, at least in a work situation, because we are scared that we're not going to find anything, that we can't find anything better, or, well, money, you know, money doesn't grow on tree, blah, blah, blah. How am I going to do? I need money. I need to do it. What are your thoughts about that? Like, can we work on that fear thanks to human design or thanks to astrology? Or because like there is the reality, that's the reality of life, right? We need money to in order to pay for stuff, and it's part of the human condition, human experience. So how can we listen to the red flags, say no to the red flags, while balancing our the reality of needing money?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I have a hard and fast answer for you, but I guess I am more trusting that things work out the way that they're supposed to. Even with that job, you know, there were lessons I needed to learn. And also at the same time, that job, even though there were red flags at the beginning, whatever, that I could have just said no to, you know, it did kind of come in at the last minute, you know? So I think it kind of happened the way it was supposed to. I think it can be really hard, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, balancing, you know, meeting your physical needs and doing things that are aligned with your soul's purpose. I am still figuring it out. Like I really don't have a clear answer. I just know that I've gotten to a point in my life where it's basically physically impossible for me to do something I don't want to do, or that isn't aligned, or that doesn't make sense just for money. Like I just physically can't do it anymore. So, you know, I don't have a way of being able to do that, like to teach people how to physically feel repulsed by certain jobs or something. But that's just like how it's gone down for me. But I think, you know, I don't know, you just have to be open to the possibilities. And maybe, okay, maybe you will be working a job that you don't love for a little while just to meet your physical needs. But to be able to meet those needs and not feel desperation in going after what you really want is a beautiful thing. And you'll probably feel a lot more calm and grounded in the process, rather than like quitting a job and having no plan B. Like I wouldn't ever recommend that to anyone. I know some coaches might feel comfortable saying those kind of things. I would never recommend that. I think it's really important to like have enough resources to live as you start something new, or, you know, try something more entrepreneurial. Like I don't know. Like I don't really believe in big risks, especially when you don't have experience of, you know, taking a leap like that and receiving a big reward after. Cause I think it's like a huge shock to your nervous system. That's my 2 cents.
I agree. It's a huge shock. And I think it's in these situations when we may be tempted to identify with the fear we feel even more. Like before, we say, well, we are not the fear, and we are not the fear. But in those situations that are very risky, very scary, it can become identity, unfortunately, because it's so stressful.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the fear voice is there to keep us safe. You know what I mean? But we have to be able to have discernment, right? In terms of like what fears are the right things to listen to, what fears are the ones to kind of take with a grain of salt, which are the ones to completely ignore. You know, it's like if someone has a pattern of, you know, not being as financially stable, then maybe it's good to listen to the fear voice of like, you know, don't spend your money on this thing that you don't need. You know what I mean? Like in that case, let's listen to it. And in that case, you know, maybe it's better for you, to, you know, if you want to become an entrepreneur or transition your career, to build up a lot of savings and be able to track your money better rather than, taking a risk. But then there are people, that do have a lot of savings and aren't willing to take risks. So it kind of just depends on where you're at, I think, also, and what kind of lessons you need to learn. And are there any patterns that you've been stuck in where you need to try something different, even if the different thing feels scary?
Yeah, I agree. I think many creatives, maybe they have tried at some point to do it, to make it on their own, but it's hard. And maybe it was just not the right time. Maybe they needed more perseverance at that time, or maybe it wasn't just the right time. They needed to learn some lessons, just like you said. And therefore, unfortunately, they think that, well, they have no choice and, well, they need to suck it up and take a job, even if this job doesn't light them up, because they need money and they need to live and all of that. And maybe they just put their dreams back in the top shelf and just later. And I did it for a while. Well, I was working creative jobs, but actually it was not not that creative, at least not aligned with me at all. And I thought, well, I cannot do both, and I need to be reasonable and I need to earn money. But at some point, my soul felt like it's dying because I'm not lit up. And so I think that if you have to stay in a job that you don't like, it's even more important to start doing, like in your free time, as much as you can, spending time doing what lights you up. Because it's really, like, I remember my last job, long-term job, which was very toxic. I knew I wanted to quit, but I could not. I was in China, so I really needed the money. My visa was tied to the job. So, if I quit right away, I would have to leave. It was during COVID, so it was a complex situation. So I kind of had to stay for a few months. And at the beginning, my mindset was, oh my God, why do I have to stay? What did I do to deserve that? Oh, it's so hard. Look at this day. I hate these people. I hate it. So I had this very negative energy. I was so drained. I felt like my life force is dead. I have no taste for anything. But after that, I let myself have these days of self-pity. But then after that, I thought, okay, I have to stay another 3, 4, 5 months, whatever. I'm not gonna be able to handle those days if I keep this energy, because it's too negative, too gloomy, too thick, too heavy.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay. So what I started is watching video during my lunch break. I was watching YouTube traveling videos. So I was thinking, where would I like to be next? So like imagining what would be my life after when I finally leave that job. And then it was like, okay. And then during my free time, of course, I was exhausted during the weekend because I had to recover from that stress, from that work. But at least, try to spend more time in nature, go for a walk, go for a hike. I was also close to the beach, so go to the beach if I can. And slowly, I started to also spend more time drawing and doing things for myself. So at least the next few months were more manageable. Like I was able to take some distance from that work and just say, okay, I just go, I do the minimum that I have to do. At the end of the month, I got my salary. This will allow me to pay for my dreams later on. And then at the same time, developing, like getting my life force back, basically, like nourishing my life force, so that you need, like when you leave a job, when you have a burnout, when you need to recover from burnout, it does require a lot of energy. When you want to change your life, it does require a lot of energy. So I find it's really important to nurture and nourish yourself, your soul, like with food, of course, but not only, with what lights you up, so that you can build this energy, so that after you can actually do what you love and at least work on that.
Yes, I completely agree. I love everything you said. And it reminded me of some things I did when I was kind of wanting to transition out of my full-time job. I remember, for example, instead of spending lunch breaks with people, because we were working in an office, I'd often, go somewhere by myself, like go for a walk by myself, just like think about things, clear my head, go to lunch at a nice place alone with a book or something, you know, to really like claim the time that I had and not feel like forced or obligated to hang out with colleagues and talk about work stuff that I didn't care about, things like that. And yeah, I remember, you know, talking to a colleague and, you know, she was telling me about a friend that started her own yoga studio. And then like, you know, from there, she told me that, you know, this friend had worked with a business coach. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. And it's like a business coach that, you know, if you're on unemployment, the government will pay for. So like, you know, making that connection and speaking to her like gave me more inspiration and excitement for what could come next, and also some like ideas and structure. So yeah, I think it's really good, you know, even if you're still working time, to use your lunch breaks, to use a little sliver of your weekend to just like get inspired or do things that you really love to do. Because I think also that can actually create and amplify more energy within you, especially if you're a generator or manifesting generator in human design. Like, yes, it can feel like the life force is getting sucked out of you during the week or whenever, but in the other moments, if you can do your best to like, you know, not just sit on the couch or lie in bed and do the things that you love, like I have found that I've had more energy if I try my best to focus on those things.
Yes, it's like breaking the vicious circle so that it can become a virtuous circle eventually. And also it's a reminder that we are not our work. We are not our emotions, we are not our thoughts, but we are also not our work. We are human beings. And yes, we need money. Yes, we need to work. But that's not everything in our life. I think it's very important to remember we are creative beings.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think like even, I don't know, just thinking back to when I had that job, it's like, I don't think my coworkers remember me because I wrote this article or I interviewed that person or whatever. I just think they remember me like, I don't know, bringing cookies or like maybe saying something funny or I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like more about who I am rather than what I did, even at that job. I hope that's what like stood out to people, because that's what I think about more in terms of, you know, coworkers or people I encounter. I don't think like, oh, wow, they like did that thing or, you know, whatever it was. Oh, they were like always really kind to me or really funny or really supportive or whatever it was.
Yeah, I wish. I feel like that's what I remember from people. But I felt like in my industry, in the fashion industry, people didn't seem to care who we were. It was all about how much you can produce. Like how much you can obey the orders and how fast you can work, really. That says a lot about the industry. Talking about values, are you aligned with the value of your industry? But it's great because then like once you know, like once you can say clearly, well, that's how I remember people. So I would like to be around people who remember, like who think about me that way as well, or who think about their colleague that way as well. So then it's an indication. Well, if it's not the case, well, maybe it's not the place. It's not the only indication, of course. But I think it's one of those, like looking at the company culture, the values, it's not only the company culture, but the people who work there usually does match, you know.
Yeah.
So how did you recover from your burnout, and how did you, like, did it happen right before Greece? Do you think that's also why, like, were you at the stage in your life when you were in that space? Like, if you had gone to Greece, I know you cannot imagine what would have happened, but you know, like if you had that trip in Greece before you decided to quit that job, before you had the burnout, would you have been ready to receive the chance that it was, you know, like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, I think, so when I quit, my job was an interesting time. I think, you know, my last day of work was November 2019, right? So a lot of things changed just a few months after that in the world. So I think if I had had a vacation in Greece, you know, sometime earlier that year, I don't know if it would have impacted me as much, because to be honest, I changed so much as a person, like especially early to mid 2000, because, first I was, figuring out how to do things on my own in terms of, okay, I know I want to start a business. What does that look like? What's happening with my life? Just living in a totally different structure and paradigm. And because of that, I had so much space to explore things and connect with myself more. And as much as like lockdowns and all that stuff completely sucked and was awful, for me, it was a time where I really unfolded more in a spiritual way, because I was living alone in a tiny flat. So basically every day I would like go for walks outside or runs. I would listen to podcasts. I was getting really into like self-development work. So I changed so much, like from the end of my job to like, I don't know, let's say July, August 2020. So it's nice because I had a lot of time to recover from my burnout and to kind of recenter and figure things out. And yeah, it happened, it happened.
Yes, it's in a way, maybe you needed that burnout. Maybe you needed that thing that pushed you to evolve or to grow and to change, to become who you were supposed to. And you needed to learn that. It's like we human beings, we often learn the tough way, the hard way.
Of course, that's how it happened. And yeah, that's how it happens. And it's interesting because I knew like 5 years, even before I quit that job, like that probably I was meant to work a little more independently, but I was scared, or like, I tried and it didn't really work out. And so then I gave up and blah, blah, blah. So like deep down, I knew I was meant to do things on my own, but I was deeply afraid. So that was kind of the push I needed to, really go out there and try and figure things out. Yeah, that's how it went down.
Facing your fear.
Yeah.
So then we come back to fear again. So instead of like identifying with your fear, the key is to face it, to like look at it in the eye and say, hey, what do you have for me?
Yeah, for sure. And, I think in a lot of ways it's interesting, like, people like maybe in my extended family or friends of friends, if I tell them like, oh, I don't live in Canada, I live in Greece and I used to live in Germany, they're like, wow, you're so brave. It all kind of depends on like context, and like, you never know what's going through people's heads. And like, to me, to be honest, I was never afraid of moving places. You know what I mean? That wasn't something that preoccupied my fears. So it's all so relative also. And yeah, I think it really is amazing, whether you're a little bit scared of something or very scared of something, what happens when you just kind of like keep going and push through it, as long as you're not actually putting yourself in danger. It's pretty cool. And to be honest, I think it's what life is about. And often if you don't move past certain fears, I really think like you're going to be shown things, or things are going to happen to you where you're going to have to face them and make a decision either way.
Yeah. So the discomfort of the fear is more interesting. No, not more interesting, but like it's better. Like you chose, I choose the same as you, the discomfort of facing the fear than the discomfort of kind of staying small because of the fear. That we may think, it's scary, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah, because it seems, at first, it seems more comfortable. It's easier, it's familiar. But in the long term, in the long run, it's not comfortable at all, because you kind of living a very narrow, small life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I really think I've learned over these past few years to, to trust the more courageous part of myself that, wants to push past things and wants to grow. And I think I've also just really decided to be a person that grows even when it's scary or uncomfortable. Like I didn't always used to be that way, you know? I'm a Cancer sun, you know? like I love to feel just comfortable and safe and, you know, everything's cool. But yeah, at a certain point I wanted more, and I didn't want to feel stuck, and I also didn't want to live my life with any regret, you know?
Yes. So it's also thinking about the end and thinking like life. It's funny. I think, no, it's not funny, but I think like when you think about, for me, if I think about death, if I think about my death, it kind of, in a way, some days it can be a little bit scary. No, it's not scary. Like it's when I think about death at the end of my life, thinking about this gives me life force energy. I'm like, yeah, of course, that's what I want to do.
Yes.
But if I think about sometimes in my low moments when I feel really like, so like very stressed or very scared, or also something that is still difficult for me is when I have no control, like when I don't know what's going to happen, but really don't know anything at all. And therefore I don't feel safe. I do work on this. I know how to handle it, but you know, there are some moments where this is coming and it's strong and it's like, then I feel about death, and then it robs me of my life force energy actually in those moments. But when I think about whole life and death in that completion, as being the completion, the end of the path, or at least for now, then it gives me a lot of life force energy, creative energy as well. What about you?
Yeah, I think we can get so much perspective from thinking of things that way. You know, a lot of people want to avoid thinking about death and things like that, but it's one of the most powerful things you can do. And I think, you know, different cultures all around the world, like the Tibetans for sure come to mind in terms of like, you can't really fully live life until you face the idea of death, you know, even as a concept, or also accept the different kind of deaths within yourself. It's not a full life if you don't, you know, accept the fact that you're not going to be here forever. And it is really powerful to reflect on like, okay, at the end of my life, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? What do I want to accomplish? Because, you know, some of the things that we think we should be focusing on now, we think of it in the bigger picture. We don't actually want to do them. We just think it's the correct next step or something. When really, you know, maybe what we want and the legacy that we want to leave behind is not really very logical, but it's what, you know, lights up our soul. So yeah, very, very light conversation we're having, but I do really like talking about these things, and it really puts things into very good perspective.
Well, it's heavy in a way, but in another way, you know, there's no life without death. And if we learn not to be scared of it, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying go jump a cliff and kill yourself, like, and don't do anything dangerous, like that, just for the sake of it. No. But like, as you say, accepting that it's part of the cycle and that is going to happen at some point. It's not so that we are scared and that we should live in fear. It's just so that we can see that things are not forever. Things change. Things move on. The world will move on without us.
Totally.
And the difference I wanted to make, well, I just found a word I wanted to say. It's like differentiating this fear of this death, or as in feeling this intense emotion when you're like, you know, when your emotions are so strong that you feel you cannot handle it, and therefore I experienced that. Maybe is it an anxiety attack? I'm not sure, because I've had anxiety attacks and also those deep emotions so intense that actually I thought I was gonna die from my emotions. I was like, what's going on? Why do I feel this? It's so intense that now, yeah, of course, we don't die from our emotions, but sometimes we are so scared of them that we think we're gonna die from them. That's what I mean. So it's totally different. This fear of death than thinking, oh, I'm not here forever. Actually, the other one gives me a lot of clarity and strengthen my intentions, it's easier to make to set intentions that are aligned with me. In the same way as when you stay in the job that you have to for a few months, once you know why you're doing this, once you know it's not for you, but you know you're staying for a few months, it's easier to set, your intention is clear. You're not doing things out of despair. You're not being controlled by that situation. You take the control, you take the power. You're like, okay, I'm there. I have to be there for a while. And it's actually serving me, it's serving my purpose in the long term. So it's okay, then it's easier to handle it, even if it's not the best situation. Whereas if you're like, what can I do? Poor me, I have no choice, then it's really hard. It feels really, it's the same with this, when you are scared of your emotions and you feel you can't handle them, and I'm such a victim of my emotions because why do I always feel like that? And it's unfair. Why I cannot be happy? Why do I always have to have these emotions? Whereas if you think, okay, I have these emotions, maybe they're also serving a purpose. They're showing me some information, or maybe they're helping me to move on into my path for my purpose so that I can live the life that I want, so that at the end, because I'm not going to be here forever, at the end, I won't regret it. I would have made the most of my life. I could have, how do we say? What do I want to say? I lost the train of my thoughts. Make the most of it. No, honor. Yeah, I would have honored my life or my time here, something like that. Honored myself, and felt like I have the control of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to be honest, we don't have control over a lot of things, I personally believe we don't have any control over when we leave this earth. That's my opinion. So it's kind of like, well, why don't we make the best of the time we have, right? And I think, speaking about emotions is something I've definitely learned in the past little while, especially dealing with a lot of mental health stuff, is I've also experienced those feelings of oh my God, this emotion is so overwhelming. I'm going to die from it. I can't possibly survive feeling this way. But I really believe that especially emotionally, we're never given more than we can handle, even if it might feel that way. So it's just really important to give yourself the space to actually feel them, especially if they're the more negative ones, but also, things like joy, letting yourself feel that fully. Because I think, to be honest, the only time emotions can maybe pose a problem is when we hold them in, or when we label them as bad, or if I indulge this feeling of being sad too much, then I'm going to become depressed. I really don't think that. I think the issues arise when we try to categorize things and try to suppress things too much.
Totally. And it does give birth to a lot of health issues, I think.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for part 1 of my conversation with Bianca. If you would like to know more about her, you can find her on her website, which is www.lifeforcesinc.com, and you can also find her on Instagram and TikTok under Life Forces Inc. As for me, you can find me on Instagram at rim.creativenergy, and now I have a new Instagram account that is more dedicated to this podcast and all the things I plan to support you, my dear sensitive and creative souls. And this new account is empowered.sensitive.creative. I put all the links in show notes, and I look forward to seeing you next week for part 2 of our conversation. Thank you for being here and for your support. If this resonates with you and you would love to learn more about how to reconnect to yourself, how to listen to your body, how to connect to your senses, how to be more in touch with your authenticity so that you can lead life according to your own terms, I'd love to invite you to join me and a small group of like-minded souls for a very special retreat in beautiful Provence for 5 magical days to reignite your dormant dreams and desires while cultivating new and exciting possibilities. This will be next June, 6th to 11th of June 2024, so it's next year, and I call it an enchanted interlude in the Biosphere Reserve of Luberon Regional Nature Park. This is a lovely place in the south of France. There is a kind of magic vibe to that place, particularly beautiful in June, with the various shades of greens of the Garrigue and the azure blue sky, the vibrant ochres of the Provençal Colorado, is a natural paradise that invites your heart to soar. This amazing retreat will touch on all your senses and all aspects of your being: physical, emotional, mind, creative, and soul. You'll walk the ochre canyons, listen to the sounds of wildlife, share laughters, give free rein to your creative expression, and relax into rediscovering lost dreams and new possibilities as you celebrate and uncover the next chapter of your life. We will meet our inner wisdom through mindful and creative practices led by me and other local healers: sketching, drawing, watercolor painting, wildlife birdsong reflexology, walks in nature, a cooking workshop, and a herbalist walk. By the end of our 5 nights together, you'll be relaxed, re-inspired, and ready to dive into the next chapter of your life with clarity and newfound confidence in yourself. If this is for you, you can find all the information on my website, creativenergy.com, and I also put all the links in the show notes. If you have further questions, you are not entirely sure if this is for you, or you would like to learn more, to know more about the retreat, feel free to reach out. I am now opening 30 minutes free exploration calls. I'm calling this Retreat Exploration Chat, where you can ask all the questions you have and I can tell you more about the retreat, and we can see together if this is the right thing for you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if it has inspired you, please share it around you. Also, if you feel called to it, please subscribe to the podcast and leave me a review. It really helps to spread the word out. All your questions are welcome. You can send them to me on Instagram at rim.creativenergy.com or email me via my website, rimcreativenergy.com, and don't worry, I'll share in the show notes exactly where to find me. Until next time, sending you loving creative energy.